A poor black single mother made a cold billionaire fall to his knees. No glittering beauty, no noble status, and yet she shook the heart of one of the most powerful men in the city. Inside a room blazing with crystal lights, where every glance measured worth in money and prestige. Zora Hollis walked in, wearing worn-out shoes, a dress borrowed from her sister, her eyes filled with both fear and pride. She only wanted the evening to end quickly, but then her 5-year-old son Zuri looked up, innocent and unguarded, and asked, "Do you want to be my new dad?" The room fell silent. Everyone froze. The mother clutched her child, her heart tightening with shame and pain. And Evander Cross, the billionaire who had rejected 9 privileged socialites, suddenly laughed. A rare, genuine laugh that broke through the suffocating air, leaving the glittering world around him stunned. And that was only the beginning. What do you think? How far could a poor black single mother go in a world ruled by money and power? Subscribe now, and try to guess, in the next chapter, what awaits Zora and her little boy. The glass doors swung open, and Zora Hollis felt every eye turn. Her hand held tightly onto little Zuri's. His sneakers squeaked against the marble floor, his Buzz Lightyear toy clutched like treasure. The restaurant glittered with chandeliers, polished silverware, and the hush of moneyed whispers. Women in silk gowns and men in tailored suits barely hid their stares. Zora's dress hung awkwardly. The zipper had been fixed with safety pins. She had borrowed it from her sister. On her wrist was no jewelry, only a faded elastic hair tie. She breathed in sharply. Every detail screamed, "You don't belong here." But she squeezed her son's hand tighter. "Ignore the stares, baby," she whispered, forcing a smile. "We're just here for dinner. Nothing more." Yet, deep inside, her chest tightened. The white tablecloths looked too clean, the crystal glasses too fragile, the music too soft as if mocking her every step. Zuri tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, this place smells like money." His voice was loud enough for 2 tables to hear. Zora's face burned, but then she held her head high. If tonight was going to be another reminder of where she didn't belong, then she would survive it with dignity. She hadn't made it 10 steps in when disaster struck. Her heel caught the edge of the rug. Time slowed. Zora stumbled forward, clutching Zuri's hand. A waiter lunged to steady her, but instead the tray tilted. A glass of sparkling water splashed down in a perfect arc, straight onto the dark, tailored suit of the man at the nearest table. Gasps rose. The waiter froze, mortified. Zora's breath caught. Her eyes flew up. It was him, Evander Cross, the billionaire with the sharp jaw, colder eyes, and reputation as unshakable as granite. His suit now dripped with water, spreading dark stains across fabric that probably cost more than Zora's yearly rent. Words tumbled out of her mouth. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't even... Should I..." She snatched a napkin from the table and dabbed clumsily at his chest. Her hands shook. "I promise I'm not usually a walking disaster," she whispered, half to herself. Evander's silence weighed heavy, harder than anger. His gaze fixed on her, unreadable, as if calculating the damage not to his suit but to the entire evening. Zora swallowed hard, praying for the ground to open and swallow her whole. The silence was unbearable. The waiter shifted, ready to faint. Zora fumbled with the napkin, heat rushing up her neck. Then, out of nowhere, Zuri's little voice cut through the tension. "Mom," he whispered loudly. "He looks just like Uncle Ray when he's mad and hasn't had coffee." A ripple of laughter burst from a nearby table. Zora froze in horror. "Zuri!" But the boy was already leaning closer, studying Evander's frown. "Are all billionaires this serious? You look like a grumpy cartoon." For the first time in years, something shifted in Evander Cross's face. The corner of his mouth twitched. Then, shockingly, he let out a low, genuine laugh. The sound startled even himself. It wasn't polite. It wasn't forced. It was real. Zora blinked, wide-eyed. She had read enough articles about him to know this man never laughed. Not in interviews, not at galas, not in front of cameras. And yet here he was, shoulders shaking, chuckling at a 5-year-old's blunt honesty. Zuri beamed with pride. "See, Mom, I made him laugh. I told you I could." Zora's heart swelled and sank at once. Her son had done in seconds what no one in the city had managed in years. The laughter faded, leaving behind a strange, fragile warmth at the table. Zora lowered her hands from her face, cheeks still burning. She looked at Evander. His eyes weren't as cold now. They studied her with curiosity. She exhaled. Enough pretending, enough hiding. Listen, she said quietly, voice trembling. I'm not who you think I am. Evander's brow lifted. My name isn't Riley. That's my sister. She was supposed to come tonight, but she didn't want to. I came in her place. Her throat tightened. She reached for Zuri's hand. And I'm not some glamorous date from your exclusive list. I'm just a mother. A single mother. The words dropped heavy between them. For a second, Zora braced herself for mockery, for the cold dismissal she'd been expecting since the moment she walked in. Instead, Evander leaned back slowly, eyes never leaving hers. Then he said, with unnerving calm, Thank you. For being honest. Zora blinked, stunned. Zuri swung his legs under the chair and grinned. So, are you going to be my new dad now? Zora covered her face again, mortified. But across the table, Evander laughed once more. And this time it felt like the night had shifted for good. Evander sat across from Zora, his mind drifting back to the 9 women before her. Oil heiresses, senators' daughters, a pianist, an artist. Every one of them had spoken of yachts, galleries, summer estates. They recited their resumes as if they were bargaining chips for affection. But here sat Zora Hollis. A woman in a borrowed dress. A woman who tilted her head toward the waiter and asked, So, are you Red Sox or Yankees? The young man brightened. Red Sox, ma'am. Bless your heart, Zora said with mock pity, choosing pain on purpose. I respect that. The waiter laughed so hard he nearly spilled the water. Evander frowned. None of the 9 before her had even looked at the staff, let alone made them laugh. When Zora turned back, her eyes were clear. And you, Evander? What's your team? He replied automatically, I don't follow sports. Zora arched a brow. Too busy counting money and stacking meetings to plan more meetings? For a long second, Evander's lips almost curved. It was absurd. No one spoke to him this way, but tonight, he realized he was glad someone finally did. The waiter placed the menus before them. Heavy leather covers, gilded edges. Zuri's small hands flipped through without hesitation. His finger landed squarely on the dessert page. Mom, can I get the sundae? The big one, 3 scoops. Zora smiled at him. Life's too short for small desserts. Go ahead. Evander's eyes narrowed slightly. She hadn't checked the price. She hadn't asked if he was paying. She simply let her son choose, as though joy mattered more than etiquette. And you, sir? The waiter asked. Evander hesitated. His usual response would have been just coffee. Instead, he heard Zora's voice teasing, Stress diet? I'll have the same, he said finally. Zuri's grin stretched wide. Good choice. Ice cream makes everyone nicer. The boy's certainty struck Evander harder than he expected. While other women had flaunted expensive wines, Zora's child was teaching him a lesson about happiness, with a sundae. For the first time in years, Evander didn't feel like a CEO evaluating risk. He felt like a man sitting at a table, tasting something sweet, wondering why the air suddenly seemed easier to breathe. The next morning, sunlight streamed into the Monroe estate. Octavia Cross sat at the head of the long mahogany table, her society magazine open. She had curated her son's matches with precision, grooming futures like investment portfolios. How was your date with Riley? She asked, barely glancing up. Evander stirred his coffee, pausing longer than usual. Different. Her eyes narrowed over her glasses. Different bad or different promising? Different good, he said, and then, almost too quietly, very good. Octavia closed her magazine with a sharp snap. Her son had rejected women with pedigrees, power, polished reputations. Yet he smiled, actually smiled, while speaking of this one. And what exactly makes her so special? Evander hesitated. First, her name is Zora, not Riley. Second, she's a single mother. Third, she called me a workaholic who schedules meetings to plan more meetings. And fourth, he drew a breath. She made me laugh. Silence stretched. Then Octavia clapped her hands together, startling even herself. Wonderful. A woman who makes my son laugh is a woman worth meeting. I want her here for lunch this Sunday. Evander blinked, stunned. You want to meet her? Of course. Bring the boy too. I've always wanted a grandson. Sunday arrived too quickly. Zora stood outside the Cross mansion, her hand gripping Zuri's. The red brick walls rose like something out of a period film. White columns stretched upward. Perfect gardens lined the path. Mom, Zuri whispered, eyes wide, is this a castle? No, baby, she said softly. Just a very, very big house. Her heart pounded. Every polished window screamed wealth. Every trimmed hedge whispered, "You don't belong." Evander appeared at the door, wearing a shirt that probably cost her monthly rent. "You're right on time," he said with a small smile. Zuri bounced on his heels. "Can I play in the garden? It looks like a maze." "Go ahead," Evander nodded. As her son ran toward the hedges, Zora muttered, "This is insane. I don't know how to act in houses like this. I say dumb things when I'm nervous." Evander's eyes softened. "Just breathe. You'll be fine." But Zora couldn't shake the dread. She was about to walk into a world where money was the language, and she had none to speak. She lifted her chin anyway. For her son, she would walk into any castle, even if she felt like the peasant invited only by mistake. The dining room shimmered with silver candlesticks and fine china. Octavia Cross rose gracefully as Zora entered. "Zora, dear," she said, extending both hands. "Evander has told me so much about you." Zora glanced at Evander, startled. "I hope he mentioned I'm a walking disaster." "He did," Octavia replied with a smile, "and I loved it." Zora blinked. That wasn't the reaction she expected. Zuri's voice drifted in from the garden, calling about dragons in the hedges. Octavia laughed, the sound genuine. This house has needed a child's voice for far too long. Zora relaxed slightly. She even dared a joke. "No wonder Evander looks so serious all the time. Growing up here must feel like eating etiquette manuals for breakfast." The silence lasted 2 beats. Then Octavia threw her head back and laughed, a warm, ringing laugh that filled the room. Evander shook his head, but even his lips curved at the corners. In that instant, Zora realized something remarkable. She had walked in expecting icy judgment. Instead, she found an elegant woman who seemed relieved. Relieved that someone finally spoke to her son without fear, without calculation. For the first time, Zora thought, maybe I'm not an intruder here after all. The laughter in the dining room faded when the doors swung open. A tall woman entered without hesitation, dressed in couture silk that gleamed beneath the chandeliers. "Evander, darling," she purred, her voice dripping entitlement. Zora felt her chest tighten. She didn't need an introduction to know. This had to be Portia Van Alen, the name whispered through society columns. Octavia's brow furrowed. "Portia, I don't recall inviting you." "Oh, I was simply in the neighborhood," Portia replied sweetly, though her eyes locked onto Zora with thinly veiled disdain. She extended a manicured hand. "And this must be the accessory." The word cut sharper than any knife. Zora's stomach nodded, but she held Portia's gaze. Portia tilted her head, lips curving. "A pretty little addition. Evander, you always did enjoy collecting rare pieces." Octavia's face darkened, but before she could speak, Evander rose. "Enough, Portia." Yet the damage had already been done. Zora felt the sting of humiliation spread through her chest. Every polished surface in the room seemed to reflect the same cruel truth. She did not belong. And still, she straightened her back, silently vowing not to break. Portia's smile sharpened. "Oh, but we haven't even begun." Her gaze swept the table, then returned to Zora. "Tell me, do you all know where our guest of honor once worked?" "Bella Vista. Downtown. I remember it well. She spilled sauce on my Hermes purse 2 years ago, wasn't it?" Zora's throat tightened. The memory was real, but twisted in Portia's mouth. "And now," Portia went on, her voice silk over steel, "she strolls into the Monroe mansion as though she belongs. Convenient, isn't it? Single mother, cute child, lonely billionaire, textbook strategy." The words dripped like acid. Zuri appeared at the door just then, clutching a toy dragon, his innocent eyes darting between the adults. "Mom, is she being mean to you?" Zora forced a smile. "It's fine, sweetheart." But Portia's smirk widened. "See? Even the child plays his role. So clever. A ready-made sob story to melt Evander's heart." The room went cold. Octavia's jaw tightened. Evander's hands clenched against the table. But Zora! She refused to cower. Her pulse hammered, yet her spine held straight. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was gathering strength for what she knew she had to say. The weight of every gaze pressed down on her. Still, Zora rose slowly from her chair. Her voice didn't tremble. "Yes, I was a waitress." The room stilled. "I carried trays, scrubbed floors, and worked double shifts. Not because it was glamorous, not because it won me invitations, but because I had a son to feed." Her eyes burned, but her chin lifted. "I raised my child with dignity. Every paycheck was mine. Every sacrifice was mine, and I will never apologize for that." Zuri's small hand wrapped around her fingers as if to echo her words. Octavia's expression softened, pride glimmering in her eyes. "But Evander—" He looked conflicted. Zora met his gaze. "So, if the worst insult you can throw at me is that I worked for a living, then I'll take it, because it means I chose to stand on my own 2 feet." Her voice carried through the hall, calm and unshakable. "I may not belong in your circles, Portia, but I belong to myself, and that is more than you can say." The silence that followed was deafening, but in Evander's eyes doubt had begun to stir. Portia was ready. She pulled a sleek folder from her bag, sliding it across the table. "Shall I tell you more, Evander?" she said sweetly. "Zora looked you up online before the date. She's dated older men before, men with stability, men with wealth. History repeats itself." Evander's jaw tightened. His fingers brushed the folder even as his heart pounded. "Evander!" Zora said sharply, her chest aching. "Don't you dare!" But he opened it. Photographs, notes, twisted half-truths. Enough to plant seeds of doubt. His voice was low. "Is this true?" Zora's eyes stung with sudden tears. "I looked you up because I'm a mother. I needed to know who I was meeting, and yes, I dated a man who offered stability, but I left him because he wanted to own me. That's the truth." Her words hit like sparks against stone, but his silence was worse. She shook her head, pulling Zuri close. "I will not stand here begging to be believed. If you see me as a threat, then I don't belong." She walked toward the door, tears blurring her vision. "Mommy?" Zuri whispered, clutching tighter, and for the first time she could not answer him. The mansion was silent after they left. Evander sat alone in his study, the folder still unopened beside him. Portia's poison lingered in his ears. Zora's trembling voice echoed in his chest. He tried to tell himself it was caution. That doubt was reasonable. That trust came at too high a cost. But then, another voice rose above the noise, high, clear, innocent. "Are you going to be my new dad?" Zuri's question, so simple, so guileless, replayed in his mind until his throat burned. He pressed his palms against his eyes, but the boy's face appeared anyway. Wide eyes, a crooked smile, the hope of a child who had already chosen him. For the first time in years, Evander Cross felt weak. Not in business, not in reputation, but in his own heart. He whispered into the emptiness, "I don't know how to come back from this." And yet, even as the words fell, he knew the truth. The boy's question wasn't fading, it was haunting him. Not as accusation, but as invitation. If only he had the courage to answer yes. It was late afternoon when Octavia received an unexpected visitor. A nervous man in a worn gray suit clutched a briefcase like a lifeline. "My name is Malcolm Crane," he said, his voice unsteady. "I'm a private investigator. I was hired by Portia Van Allen." Octavia's eyes sharpened. "Go on." "She asked me to dig into Zora Hollis. I found a few facts. Yes, she once worked as a waitress. Yes, she dated a man named Patterson years ago, but Portia demanded more. She pushed me to fabricate, to twist what little I had until it looked like a pattern." Octavia's fingers curled against the armrest. "I was wrong to agree," Malcolm admitted, his hands shaking. "But I have a family. Bills. I thought it was just work. Only later did I realize she meant to destroy a woman's life. And now, I can't stay silent." He slid papers across the table. Documents, recordings, proof that Portia had orchestrated everything. Octavia exhaled, anger simmering beneath her composure. "You'll tell my son all of this, word for word. Do you understand?" Malcolm nodded. Relief flickered in his eyes. At last, the truth had cracked open the lies. But would it be too late to mend what had been broken? Evander stood by the tall windows of his office as Octavia entered, Malcolm trailing behind. The investigator repeated every word, every forged note, every demand from Portia. The lies unraveled like a thread pulled too far. When the silence settled, Evander pressed his hands to his face. "I accused her of being a liar. I doubted every word she spoke, and all along, it was Portia." Octavia's voice cut sharp. "You didn't just doubt her. You humiliated her. You broke her son's heart. That boy looked at you as if you were already his father, and you left him." Her words pierced deeper than any blade. "I thought I was protecting myself," Evander whispered. "But I destroyed the only thing real I've ever had." Octavia stepped closer, her tone softer now. "Zora gave you honesty when she had every reason to hide, and you answered her with suspicion. If you want her back, you'll need more than apologies. You'll need humility. Evander's chest ached. For once, business strategies and contracts meant nothing. What mattered was a woman who had stood tall in her truth, and the child who had asked only for love. He had thrown it all away, and now he had to find them. Night had fallen by the time Evander reached the apartment he had once offered Zora. The door swung open easily, too easily. The rooms were stripped of life. No toys scattered across the rug, no sketches taped to the fridge, no faint scent of her cooking in the air. He walked into the small bedroom where Zuri had slept. The bed was made, the blanket neatly folded. On the pillow lay a folded piece of paper. Evander's hands trembled as he opened it. It was a crayon drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall man in a suit, a smiling woman, and a boy clutching a toy. Above them, shaky letters spelled, "Mr. Ice Cream, find me when you want to be my dad for real." His throat tightened. He sat heavily on the bed, the drawing shaking in his grip. This wasn't just a picture, it was a message. A plea. A child's hope captured in bright wax colors. Evander felt his chest cave in. He had turned laughter into silence, trust into absence, a family into emptiness. But the drawing whispered a truth he couldn't ignore. They hadn't vanished. They were waiting for him to choose. The next morning, Evander knocked at the upstairs door of the modest house. A gray-haired woman opened it, wiping flour from her hands. "Mrs. Pike?" he asked. "That's me. You must be Mr. Ice Cream," she said with a wry smile. His chest tightened. "Are Zora and Zuri here?" Her smile faded. "No, dear. They left yesterday. Said Boston was too heavy with bad memories." "Where did they go?" His voice cracked with urgency. "She mentioned Springfield. Back to her grandmother's house. Said it was safer. Said she needed to start over." The words hit harder than any boardroom loss. Zora wasn't just hiding. She was rebuilding, away from him. Mrs. Pike touched his arm gently. "That woman loves you. And that little boy? He talked about you like you were his hero. Don't waste that." Evander nodded, swallowing the ache. Minutes later, his car was on the road. The city lights fell behind him, replaced by open highways and the distant promise of Springfield. For once in his life, he wasn't chasing profit or power. He was chasing the only thing that mattered: love, trust, and the fragile hope of a second chance. Springfield smelled of cut grass and old porches. Evander parked outside a yellow house with a white fence, the address Mrs. Pike had given him. When the door opened, a small, sharp-eyed woman stood there, arms crossed. "You must be the billionaire who broke my granddaughter's heart," she said flatly. Evander's throat tightened. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Evander Cross. I came to make it right." Her eyes narrowed. "If you're only here to wound her again, turn around now. Zora doesn't need another scar, neither does that boy." He swallowed hard. "I know. I was a fool. I believed lies because it was easier than trusting the truth. I can't undo the pain I caused, but I would give anything for a chance to prove I'm not the man who walked away." Grandma Mavis studied him for a long, tense moment. The silence pressed heavy, like judgment itself. Finally, she stepped aside. "All right, you'll come in, but understand this: if you hurt them again, you'll answer to me." Evander bowed his head, stepping across the threshold. For the first time since losing Zora, hope flickered. He had passed the first gate, but the hardest road still lay ahead. Grandma Mavis led him into the living room. The air smelled of old wood and lavender. She motioned for him to sit, but her eyes stayed sharp. "Tell me, Mr. Cross, why are you here?" Evander clasped his hands, leaning forward. "Because I love her, because I love her son, and because I was a coward when they needed me most." Mavis studied him without blinking. "I doubted her," he admitted. "I listened to lies because I was afraid of believing something real. But Zora, she is the only real thing I've ever known. I will spend the rest of my life proving that to her, if she lets me." The old woman's eyes softened, though her tone stayed firm. Big words are easy. Proving them is harder. "I'll prove it," Evander said, "no matter the cost." Mavis nodded slowly. "She left yesterday, went to Hartwell, took a job dressing up at birthday parties, said she needed to make ends meet." Evander rose, determination in his eyes. "Then that's where I'll go." Mavis finally allowed the faintest smile. "You sound like a man chasing more than money. Don't you dare quit now." The Hartwell Community Center pulsed with balloons, streamers, and children's laughter. Music blared. Parents chatted at the edges of the room. Zora stood near the cake table adjusting her costume apron. She had been hired to help with games, her son cheering in the corner. Then the mascot arrived. A giant ice cream cone waddling through the crowd, oversized head bobbing. Children squealed and ran toward it. The figure knelt, handing out candy. Then, slowly, it turned toward Zora. Her brows knit. Something about the posture felt familiar. The mascot walked closer, then dropped to one knee right in front of her. Gasps rippled through the children. With one swift motion, the headpiece came off. It was Evander. Zora's breath caught in her throat. He looked up at her, face flushed but determined, voice breaking. "Zora Hollis. I was a fool. I doubted you when you deserved faith. I hurt you when all you showed me was love. But today, in front of these children, I'm asking for a chance to make it right." The children fell silent, eyes wide. Every parent leaned in, and Zora's world tilted, caught between disbelief and the aching truth of his words. Still in the absurd ice cream costume, Evander reached into the oversized pocket. His hand shook as he pulled out a small velvet box. The room erupted with squeals and whispers. He looked up at her, eyes raw. "Zora Hollis, will you marry me?" Zora's lips parted, her breath uneven. "You're insane. You're in a giant cone." A little girl in the front shouted, "Say yes!" Then a chorus followed, dozens of children chanting, "Say yes! Say yes!" Zuri pushed through the crowd, tugging at his mother's skirt. "Mommy, look, he's serious." Evander held out the ring, his voice steady now. "I don't care if I look ridiculous. I don't care who laughs. The only thing I care about is proving to you that you and Zuri are my family. Please, let me spend my life making this up to you." Zora covered her face, overwhelmed. Laughter bubbled through her tears. "You're impossible." Zuri tugged harder. "But Mom, he's our Mr. Ice Cream." The children's chant grew louder, echoing through the hall, and Zora's heart cracked open in the only direction it could go. Back at Springfield, the evening felt different. The yellow house glowed warmer than ever. Evander knelt in the living room as Zuri ran toward him. The boy didn't hesitate. He launched straight into his arms. "Mr. Ice Cream!" Zuri squealed, laughter bubbling from his chest. "You came back!" Evander clutched him tight, burying his face in the boy's hair. "I'll never leave again. Not ever." Zuri pulled back, eyes wide with hope. "So, can I call you Dad for real now?" The question pierced Evander's chest. He nodded, voice thick. "Yes. From today, you can call me Dad." The boy's arms wrapped tighter around his neck. "Best day ever." Across the room, Zora leaned against the doorway, tears streaking her cheeks. She had braced herself for disappointment, for regret. But what she saw instead was her son safe in the arms of a man who had finally chosen them. Her heart softened, the weight lifting for the first time in months. Evander glanced up at her, eyes silently pleading, and Zora, at last, allowed herself to smile. It didn't take long for the world to find out. By morning, headlines blazed across screens. "Billionaire proposes to single mother in ice cream costume." Some laughed, some sneered, others called it the love story of the year, but the cruelest whispers were the ones Zora had feared most. Gold digger. Calculated move. She played him with that child. Photographers camped outside the Springfield house, microphones shoved in her face. Questions rained down like arrows. "Zora, did you plan this? Are you marrying him for money? Do you think you belong in his world?" Zora kept her head down, shielding Zuri from the flashing lights. Inside the house, she trembled. She had lived her life avoiding gossip, surviving paycheck to paycheck. Now, strangers with expensive suits dissected her worth in front of her child. Evander stood at the window, jaw tight. He had expected pushback, but the storm still burned. "Let them say what they want," he told her. "They don't know you. They don't know us." But Zora's eyes filled with fear. It wasn't just about her anymore. The weight of his world had landed squarely on the boy in her arms. The hall brimmed with flashing cameras. Reporters filled every row, their voices buzzing like a swarm. Evander stood at the podium, Zora and Zuri beside him. Questions fired. Is this love or scandal? Are you being manipulated? Evander raised his hand, his voice calm but firm. Enough. I've built empires. I've faced rivals. But nothing matters more than what I say now. He looked at Zora, then down at Zuri. Zora and Zuri are my family. The room fell into stunned silence. Zuri tugged at his sleeve, eyes bright. Can I talk? Evander lifted him up to the microphone. My dad builds the best pillow forts. Zuri announced proudly. "He makes castles better than anyone." Laughter rippled through the hall, reporters lowering their cameras as smiles spread. Evander pressed his forehead against the boy's, his voice low. "Thank you, son." The headlines would twist, the whispers would return. But for that moment, the truth had been spoken, clear and unshakable. And Zora, watching from the side, felt her heart finally steady. The week of the charity gala arrived. Zora threw herself into planning, determined to prove she belonged. She arranged every detail with care: decorations, performers, children's activities. Then disaster struck. The morning of the event, the storage facility was found ransacked. Costumes shredded, decorations ruined, sound equipment smashed beyond repair. Zora rushed to the site, her chest hollow. Volunteers whispered. Organizers glared. "This is a disaster," one snapped. "We can't risk more embarrassment. You're done, Miss Hollis." Her voice broke. "Please, give me a chance to fix this." But they turned away. In their eyes, she wasn't a capable planner. She was just a liability. Zora stumbled outside, pressing her back against the wall. Tears stung, but she refused to let them fall. It wasn't only her reputation. It was the children who would lose the celebration. It was every effort, every late night, collapsing like ash. She whispered to herself, "Not again. I can't let them take this away." And somewhere deep, resolve began to burn. By evening, Octavia Cross arrived at Zora's door, flanked by two impeccably dressed friends. "They tried to crush you," Octavia said briskly, "but they won't succeed. We'll host the gala right here, at the estate. Every guest will attend. Every child will smile. You'll lead it." Zora blinked in disbelief. "Me?" Octavia's lips curved. "Yes, you. This is your moment. Show them who you are." Hours later, the mansion transformed. Not into a ballroom of crystal and silver, but into a playground of color. Balloons filled the courtyard. Musicians played cheerful tunes. Children painted faces, chased bubbles, and laughed until their bellies hurt. Zora directed it all, her nerves slowly replaced with pride. Parents approached her with gratitude. Kids clung to her hands, their joy undeniable. For once, the night wasn't about power or prestige. It was about childhood, about love, about dignity restored. Standing at the edge of the garden, Evander watched her. She wasn't an accessory. She wasn't a liability. She was the heart of it all, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do next. The event reached its peak. Hundreds gathered under the glowing lanterns. Laughter rang through the estate. Evander stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. His voice carried across the garden. "Tonight, we've done more than host a gala. Tonight, we begin a promise. The Hollis Cross Foundation will fund programs for children across this city, because no child should grow up without hope." Applause thundered. He turned then, searching the crowd until his eyes found Zora. His chest tightened. Before the sea of witnesses, he walked to her. And there, beneath strings of lights, he lowered himself to one knee. Gasps rippled. Cameras flashed. Evander's voice broke. "Zora Hollis, I asked you once before, dressed as a fool in an ice cream cone. Tonight, I ask again, not in costume, but with my heart. Will you marry me?" The crowd hushed. Even the children went still. Zora's hands trembled as she covered her mouth, tears streaming. Zuri pushed at her side, whispering urgently, "Say yes, Mom, please." And in that sacred pause, Zora whispered back through her tears, "Yes." The crowd erupted, cheers rising into the night sky. The wedding was small, simple, and filled with laughter. No chandeliers, no grand speeches, just family, friends, and joy stitched into every moment. Zora walked down the aisle in a modest gown, her eyes locked on Evander's. He waited with trembling hands, his face open, no walls left between them. When vows were spoken, there were no rehearsed words, only raw truth, promises of respect, loyalty, and love. Later, in the glow of the reception, Zuri raised his glass of apple juice high. His voice rang clear. "I have a dad now, and my mom, she's the queen of our family." Tears glimmered in every eye. The applause was gentle, but it carried the weight of hearts healed. For Zora, it wasn't wealth that mattered. For Evander, it wasn't power. It was the discovery that love, real love, could tear down every wall of doubt, every lie, every cruel whisper. And for Zuri, it was simple. He finally had a family that was his. If you believe in the strength of love and family, share this story. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next journey that will touch your heart.